Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the house you live in, the store where you shop, and even the warehouse that ships your online order all share the same invisible landlord. A single company with roots in private equity has quietly tightened its grip over American neighborhoods. This isn't just about corporate ownership. It's about how much it now costs you to live, breathe, and survive in America. For years, you've been told that the American dream rests on owning your own home, building equity, and passing something down to your children. But what happens when the dream is bought out in bulk? What happens when the same company that acquires your neighbor's house also controls the rent you pay, the mortgage rates you compete against, and even the hotels you might escape to for a weekend break? The question isn't just whether Blackstone holds too many keys to America's front doors. The real question is, what does this mean for the cost of living in America? To understand the storm we're walking into, we first need to understand the giant casting its shadow over the nation. Blackstone is not just another Wall Street name, it is the largest alternative asset manager in the world, commanding trillions in capital spread across real estate, infrastructure, technology, and even energy. What makes them unique isn't only their size, but the way their strategy spills directly into your living expenses. Picture this. When most families see a house, they see shelter, a future, and maybe a backyard for their kids. When Blackstone sees the same house, it sees a line on a balance sheet, another unit to package, rent out, or leverage for financial gain. That shift in perspective turns entire neighborhoods into portfolios. It turns communities into spreadsheets. And the scope is staggering. Blackstone holds millions of square feet of residential and commercial property. From suburban homes in Florida to apartment complexes in the Midwest, from medical offices in Texas to data centers in California, their fingerprints are everywhere. And here's the twist. You may never see their name on the building. Instead, you encounter subsidiaries, shell companies, or branded fronts, masking the true landlord behind the curtain. Why does this matter? Because the more property they control, the more influence they exert over what we all pay. Rent prices, housing supply, even the cost of groceries at a strip mall they own, these are no longer shaped by local markets alone. They're influenced by decisions made in a boardroom hundreds of miles away, by executives whose incentives are tied not to your well-being but to shareholder returns. This isn't simply a business model, it's a power structure, and it sets the stage for how Blackstone's grip translates directly into the rising cost of living in America. How Blackstone shapes housing and daily life. Blackstone's influence doesn't unfold in headlines, it unfolds block by block in the neighborhoods where families struggle to keep up with rising costs. Instead of buying a single home here and there, Blackstone uses immense pools of cash to purchase entire bundles of properties in one sweep. These acquisitions aren't random. They're targeted in fast-growing cities where wages can't keep pace with demand. By moving quickly with cash offers, they bypass the very hurdles ordinary buyers face: mortgage approvals, credit checks, saving for down payments. Families are left competing against a financial juggernaut that plays by a different set of rules. Once inside these communities, Blackstone has a playbook that transforms local life. Properties are not simply rented out, they're integrated into a system where pricing algorithms decide how much you will pay. These algorithms monitor demand, compare neighborhood data, and steadily nudge rent upward. If one company controls enough homes in the same area, those nudges don't just follow the market, they set the market. A modest $50 increase may not sound catastrophic on its own, but when applied across thousands of tenants, it becomes a windfall for the landlord and a hardship for every household. But the impact doesn't stop at rent. Consider what happens when Blackstone owns the commercial strip where your grocery store is located, or the office park where your doctor's clinic operates. Each rent increase on those businesses eventually trickles down into the prices you pay for food, healthcare, or even the gas station convenience store. Ownership spreads like a web, catching the essentials of daily life and wrapping them in a financial logic that prioritizes returns over affordability. This is how control looks in practice. It's not about one skyscraper in Manhattan or a luxury hotel chain. It's about the everyday places where ordinary Americans live and spend. When your rent rises, when your grocery bill creeps higher, when local businesses shutter because they can't meet the new lease terms, you're seeing the mechanics of Blackstone's dominance translate directly into the cost of living in America. The consequences of this corporate ownership extend far beyond a rent check. They carve deep scars into the very fabric of American life. When one company accumulates properties at such scale, it doesn't just affect tenants, it reshapes communities. Streets that once reflected diverse ownership, where neighbors built equity over decades, shift toward a model where entire blocks are rented from the same invisible landlord. That shift erodes the foundation of middle-class stability. Homeownership. For decades, buying a modest house was more than a financial decision. It was a cultural rite of passage, a promise of upward mobility. But with Blackstone and firms like it tightening their grip, the ladder to that promise pulls further away. Instead of building wealth, families are locked into cycles of rent, watching their income feed corporate profits while their own prospects shrink. The middle class, already under pressure from stagnant wages and rising healthcare costs, now faces yet another squeeze. Shelter itself is no longer a pathway forward, but a perpetual expense. The ripple effects are everywhere. In neighborhoods where Blackstone dominates, schools suffer from declining enrollment as families can't put down roots. Local businesses lose loyal customers as residents cycle in and out more frequently. Civic pride diminishes when people no longer feel ownership of the place they call home. Even political power tilts because renters tend to move more often. Their voices carry less weight in local governance compared to stable homeowners. This is not simply an economic issue, it's a social one. When communities fracture, inequality widens. Wealth flows upward into the portfolios of investors while ordinary Americans are left paying higher prices for less security. The idea of a shared national dream dissolves into a stark divide: those who own the system and those who are owned by it. And all of this circles back to a single truth. The cost of living in America is not rising by accident. It's rising by design, shaped by decisions made in corporate boardrooms that value profit over people, spreadsheets over neighborhoods, and short-term returns over generational stability. How policy protects giants like Blackstone. Behind every empire of wealth lies a shield of influence. Blackstone's dominance isn't sustained by market savvy alone, it's reinforced by a political environment that tilts the rules in their favor. Campaign contributions, lobbying networks, and revolving door relationships with lawmakers ensure that the system rarely challenges their power. When you peel back the layers, it becomes clear. Policy choices are not neutral. They are engineered to protect the biggest players while leaving ordinary families exposed. Consider the carried interest loophole, a tax advantage worth billions to private equity firms like Blackstone. This loophole allows income earned through investments to be taxed at lower rates than wages earned by workers. It's a financial sleight of hand that widens inequality. While families pay full taxes on every paycheck, corporations exploit loopholes to preserve profits, strengthening their ability to buy more homes, more buildings, and more influence. Lobbying dollars amplify this advantage. Blackstone has spent millions shaping housing, tax, and financial regulations. They argue that institutional investment provides stability to markets, but in practice, it creates instability for the people living inside them. Protections for tenants are watered down. Foreclosure rules are written with loopholes, and attempts to regulate rent hikes often stall under political pressure. The result? A legal environment that enables corporate landlords to keep raising costs without meaningful oversight. This isn't abstract politics, it's the reason your rent goes up while wages stagnate. It's why relief programs often arrive too late or too weak. During crises, from the 2008 financial collapse to the COVID-19 pandemic, government interventions often prioritized shoring up the financial system rather than shielding households from predatory practices. When eviction bans were enacted, reports showed landlords tied to private equity, finding ways to skirt the rules, filing lawsuits, or using technicalities to displace tenants anyway. The pattern is unmistakable. When policy is written with corporate donors in mind, the cost of living for average Americans climbs higher. Housing affordability is not simply the product of supply and demand, it's a reflection of who has the loudest voice in Washington. And right now, companies like Blackstone speak with a megaphone, while ordinary families are barely heard. Statistics tell one part of the story, but the true cost of corporate control comes alive in the lives of ordinary families. Behind every rising rent and every rejected mortgage bid is a household forced to make painful decisions. Do we downsize? Do we move farther from work? Or do we sacrifice savings for the chance to stay put? Take the example of a young couple hoping to buy their first home in a mid-sized American city. They save for years, cut back on vacations, and put aside every dollar they can. When they finally find a modest 3-bedroom house, they discover their offer doesn't stand a chance, not because another family outbid them, but because a corporate buyer offered cash, no contingencies, and closed within days. The couple remains renters, watching the home they dreamed of slip into a rental portfolio where they may one day pay rent to live in the very place they once tried to buy. Or consider retirees on fixed incomes. They spent decades paying off their homes, expecting retirement to mean security. But when their children or grandchildren try to find housing nearby, they can't afford it. Neighborhoods change, rents surge, and families scatter not by choice, but by necessity. The cost of living isn't just about money, it's about losing the ability to stay connected to the people and places that matter most. These stories are not rare. They are repeated across Phoenix, Charlotte, Orlando, and dozens of other cities where corporate landlords now hold sway. Tenants report delayed maintenance, unexpected fees, and rent increases that outpace inflation. A leaky roof or broken heater becomes more than an inconvenience. It's a reminder that the landlord is not a neighbor you can negotiate with, but a corporation answering to investors. When we talk about the cost of living in America, we cannot separate it from these lived realities. It's not just higher bills, it's stress, instability, and the erosion of community ties. It's parents explaining to children why they have to leave the only home they've ever known. It's workers commuting hours because affordable housing near jobs no longer exists. It's the quiet daily toll of a system designed to maximize returns at the expense of ordinary lives. Rethinking housing and the future of affordability. When we step back, the picture becomes clear. Blackstone's rise is not just a story about real estate, it is a story about power, about how a single company's strategy can reshape the everyday lives of millions. By controlling homes, apartments, shopping centers, and offices, they quietly influence what Americans pay for the essentials of life. This isn't accidental. It's the byproduct of a system that rewards financial dominance while leaving families to shoulder the burden. But the question we face is larger than Blackstone itself. It forces us to ask, what is housing in America supposed to be? Is it a basic foundation for family and community? Or is it merely another financial instrument to be packaged and sold? If we accept the second answer, then the cost of living in America will only continue to climb, squeezing future generations out of stability. Yet the future is not set in stone. Communities can demand transparency about who owns their neighborhoods. Voters can press for policy that closes loopholes and levels the playing field for families instead of corporations. Conversations about housing can shift from short-term fixes to long-term visions of affordability, equity, and dignity. Because housing is not just about walls and roofs, it's about belonging, opportunity, and hope. So the next time you hear about rising rents, bidding wars, or record profits for Wall Street landlords, remember, these are not disconnected events. They are threads in the same fabric, a fabric woven by companies that treat homes as commodities. And the choice before us is whether we allow that fabric to smother the American dream, or whether we decide to stitch together something different, something fairer, something sustainable. The cost of living in America is more than an economic statistic. It's a mirror reflecting who we are and who we want to be. The question remains, Will we reclaim the promise of housing for people, or will we continue to rent the future from those who already own too much of it?